And many people are questioning, is it the end of international law? Has it failed?
And of course, it breaks it because international law literally says you can't go onto a sovereign land and carry out military exercises. You can't kidnap a leader, whether you think they're legitimate or not.
America is saying, look, this is our backyard. We can't allow Venezuela to get closer to China and Russia. We can't allow them to use their resources and trade with these nations that are a threat to their superpower status.
America are the ones that were massively involved in creating the UN, the ICJ. All of these institutions were created by these powers. And you have to ask the question, why were they created by these powers?
But I would argue that actually this is actually a pure form of capitalism. Capitalism is survival of the fittest. Serve your self-interest. Okay, that's about the individual, but that extends to nations, right?
And what we're seeing in America today is a fascist state.
It's come a time where their soft power has been eroded. So now they have to resort to hard power.
But the likes of the Europeans are sat there going, we've preached these values to our populations. Can we just suddenly now go, because America says so, yeah, this is legal now? You can't. And if you do, you lose your populations.
It's a statement to the likes of Russia and China, but also a statement to all these other nations that are a bit anti-imperialist and are getting closer and deepening ties with Russia and China. It's a message to all of them. In fact, it's a message to everyone.
But also because Venezuela were making deals with China to sell their oil in yuan. What does that do? That goes against the petrodollar. Every single one is saying that, wait there a minute, we've been pushed to hate Islam more by the Zionists. This was a playbook. So if those people are now saying that, that means we've got a conducive environment for dawah where we go, that's correct, because they fear it and they fear the rules of Allah coming back on this earth and bringing actual justice.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. You're listening to the Muslim Podcaster. I'm your host Majid, and today I'm joined by my co-hosts, Brother Rash and Brother JK. Assalamu alaikum, brothers, and as usual, welcome to the show.
Wa alaikum salam. Thanks for having us.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. How's everything been going your side? Enjoying the snow?
Not that much snow, but yeah, it's cold though, so better to be indoors for the time being.
Yeah, exactly. JK, yourself?
Yeah, alhamdulillah. Good. It's been a while, I think, to be honest, with doing one of these. But yes, just busy with work and stuff. Yeah, and yeah, the weather is quite cold in the UK. So
yeah, bro, everyone's busy, man, and the international scene has also been busy as well. So yeah, it's been a while since we recorded a podcast together, but inshallah, let's get on with it. So I'm thinking, let's get into it. Yeah. The topic today is going to be an interesting one. So one that loads of people are talking about because of recent events in Venezuela, all the discussion about Greenland, even to some extent the recognition of Somaliland by the Zionists, all of these things. And the sort of rhetoric and the language being used by the mainly American politicians, to be honest with you, has got people thinking about the concept of international law, the rules-based order. And many people are questioning whether actually, you know what, has it failed? Has the concept of international law, is it the end of international law? Has it failed? Are we on a decline and so on? So inshallah, we'll discuss this topic today. And just to kick things off, I mean, from my point of view, before I bring you guys in, the concept of international law is something which I don't believe in, right? Because this has always been something which really has been a mechanism for the powerful nations in actually just using as a stick against, the weaker states, right? It's something that has looked good on paper, but in reality, and we can go through many examples where it's just been, something which is an illusion, right? Where certain states use international law, the concept of it for their own benefit, whilst others are pushed into a corner, using the stick of international law. And to be honest with you, if we look at what happened in Gaza, and actually what is still happening in Gaza, we can't forget this, right? Um, People were saying this actually exposes international law. But in reality, let's look at it in a different way. Rather than thinking that it exposes international law, in fact, it actually showed what the reality of international law is. Something which is used by those who want to achieve certain political gains, and to make everyone else quiet and to feel like there's an international community and there's, if anyone goes out of line, there's a rules-based order to bring everyone in line. Gaza has demonstrated that, actually this international law is not just false, it actually is doing what it's designed to do. And we can give examples where people have been removed on the basis of international law, and the ones that are removing them don't even follow international law themselves, right? So the main news, over the last week or so, has been the kidnapping of Maduro from Venezuela. The Americans went in to a sovereign nation, kidnapped the head of state and his wife. And if you, watch the interviews, and we can go into some of those quotes later, where journalists are asking the politicians, Trump, people like Stephen Miller, about international law, and their response is, what international law, right? We make our own law. Everything's based on power. Everything is based on might, paraphrasing, right? So just kick on with Venezuela. What are your thoughts on Venezuela? Rasha, I'll start off with you. In terms of international law, um, would you say, from your point of view, that this has exposed international law, or actually is this just consistent with what we've seen in regards to international law over the last 100 years or so?
Yeah, no, no, good question. It depends which perspective you look at it. If you look at it purely from a legality point of view, a legal basis, and you look at like the UN Charter, you look at what the international laws kind of say literally, then of course it breaks it, because international law literally says you can't go onto a sovereign land and carry out military exercises. You can't kidnap a leader, whether you think they're legitimate or not. So purely from a legal standpoint, it's completely against any that law and any law that anybody could come up with, in terms of, if you're going to write sovereignty into any kind of constitution, any type of international constitution, you're going to say that if this isn't allowed and someone does it, clearly it breaks the law. So yeah, legally, completely, it's against international law. It's against the UN Charter. All of the countries that have signed up to these will really, even though the likes of Britain, for example, and the weasel that is Starmer, and the way he dealt with the interview, where he doesn't want to say. The reason why he doesn't want to say is he's a lawyer by trade, and he realizes that it's obvious, but he's the lapdog of America, so he has to be careful with what he says. He doesn't want to break up his relationship. So legally, absolutely, it does. However, you have to step back from the legal side of things. You've got to look at it from the point of view, and maybe JK can add to this a little bit, because he discussed this yesterday a bit. But all of these institutions were created by these powers. The Western, but America are the ones that were massively involved in creating the UN, the ICJ, the ICC. All of these institutions were created by these powers. And you have to ask the question, why were they created by these powers? Was it to bring fairness and equity and equality and all of this to the world? Or was it to make sure that now they're at the top, now they're in control, how do we maintain that control? And then sadly, for a long period of time, Muslims and non-Muslims have gone, oh, actually, yeah, they're look at this. They've set up all these systems for equality, for fairness, for justice, and people went with it. But everything, we talked about the genie out the bottle and stuff in previous podcasts, but the mask has been lifted now. Absolutely, these things don't carry any merit whatsoever because, and last point, is because that any type of law requires someone to, what's the word, enforce it. And if you don't have an enforcer, then really that law means jack.
Hmm.
Yeah, and that's what we're seeing in the world today. Is all these countries, whether they're sincere or not, they can say we subscribe to the UN and international law and all of these things, but if you can't enforce it because the bully boy across the Atlantic does whatever they like whenever they like, then it means nothing. It means absolutely nothing. So that's the way I think you got to look at it. You got to look at it from an ideological, geopolitical point of view and a legal point of view. Clearly, legally, it's illegal. You know, it goes against the things that are written down. But the things that are written down aren't worth the paper they're written on.
Yeah,
Yeah,
subhanallah.
and just to
Yeah.
add as well, I think, as Rash was saying, these were tools and institutions that were set up post World War II.
Mm,
When the US actually became a superpower after World War II, obviously the other powers, France and Britain, had been totally bankrupt from the war, and they relied on US, and the opposite happened in the US. They gained further economic dominance, military dominance. So when the US became a superpower, they in fact created and were basically pivotal in creating these institutions for a what they would put across as because they're moral, but really it's a protection mechanism. They created these institutions so they could use it against other nations, and for convenience they will say, oh, we also abide by these things. But actually when things get tough and when things require more raw capitalism, meaning when they need to serve their interests, then there is no complying with international law. So, yeah, they created institutions like the United Nations, which includes the United Nations Charter. They created the World Bank, which is meant to be a World Bank, as the name suggests. It's an international bank. They created the International Monetary Fund, which again is meant to be and these institutions were created on the basis that they were universal, meaning they were there for everyone. There is no that it doesn't serve any nation in particular. This is what it was badged as. They were neutral, meant to be neutral. But what we have seen that's come to light since they were set up is that they're not implemented consistently, and they're only used against the adversaries of the great powers, the Western powers such as the US. UK, the Western axis, if you want to call it that. So when another nation like Russia or China or other, they will use this stick and say, this is against international law. What Russia is doing in Ukraine is defies international law. What China may are trying to do potentially in Taiwan defies international law. Yet when they do it, and there is a good comparison here because with Ukraine, it's part of the backyard of Russia, right? It's former Soviet Union, so they have an interest here. Same as Taiwan. Taiwan, obviously, it's the same people actually. It's closer actually to places like Venezuela because they're not they're not American necessarily. So actually, America is saying, look, this is our backyard. We can't allow Venezuela, and I'm sure we'll get into this. We can't allow Venezuela to get closer to China and Russia. We can't allow them to use their resources and trade with these nations that are a threat to their superpower status. So they've intervened. Again, just to go back to your original question, as does this expose international law? Not it doesn't expose international law because that was the purpose of international law. That was the purpose of the UN Charter and the ICJ. The ICC is slightly different. The ICC US didn't weren't involved in setting up the ICC, and they're not actually they're not part of. That's why when they keep saying that this doesn't, what's the word they use? This they don't
It's not.
have
It's not. It's not binding on them.
it's not binding on them, yeah, because they say they're not part of it. But the other institutions are fully US are, they're part of it. The United Nations Assembly, where does it take place every year? In New York. This is it's so clear cut that these are things that they set up, yet they are not abiding by. And what it really exposes is the hypocrisy of the nations such as the US who claim to be moral actors, claim to be humanitarian, And in previous wars and stuff, they've used a pretext to say, we're going into Iraq for weapons of mass destruction, or we're going in to find bin Laden, or they use a pretext, right? In this case in Venezuela, I think they tried a little bit. Maduro is, they're charging him on drug trafficking, weapons trafficking. But with the quotes from Trump, it's quite clear. He said, we're going to run Venezuela. We're going to make sure the American companies come in and take over the oil, and they can profit from the oil. So it's really clear. I mean, I'll give it to him a little bit. At least he's been honest. At least he's been clear in terms of what they're doing, and they're not trying to hide it behind a facade of morality or being humanitarian.
Yeah, man. From what you guys have, Rash, you're on mute.
Sorry, carry on. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, no, I was gonna say, based on what you're saying, I think there are a couple of questions that come to mind. The first one is in regards to Europe, right? Because ultimately, if you think about it, the Enlightenment, the Renaissance, happened in Europe. Okay, so these ideas of secularism, of the freedoms, liberty, all these ideas originate, even though some people say from Greece, but modern day secularism, the Renaissance was actually in Europe. Yeah. So, with what's happening right now, you feel like the Europeans are kind of like being put in a difficult situation because obviously the Americans are, the cousins of the Europeans. All these migrants went over, colonialists to the Americas, right? But what we're seeing is with the stuff that's happening and the sort of line of questioning that's being put forward to the Americans about international law and stuff like this. Why it makes it difficult is because when, for example, Trump says, "I don't need international law," right? It's actually Europe that is trying to say that there has to be a rules-based order and has to be built on basically their understanding, right? It puts them in a bit of a pickle, right? When that Stephen Miller talks about power, what did he say? He said basically we live in a world that is governed by strength, force, and power. This goes against this concept of equality and liberty and all this stuff that the Europeans have been promoting. So it puts them in a difficult situation, and especially when, like you're saying, when it comes to the issue of Russia, you know, um, for them to why they're in a difficult situation is because, like Rush said, many of these guys, especially like Starmer, he knows the law, yeah. So when you're talking about it purely from a law point of view, this is illegal, right? There was no mandate. It didn't go through any UN convention, and it was illegal. Even Americans are saying, because it didn't even go through, I think it's Congress or Senate or something like this, right? That even they're saying this is not. So it's illegal. It's a good point that Rush made. From a legality point of view, it's illegal, right? So because these Europeans don't really want to upset Trump and the Americans, they won't say it was illegal, right? But at the same time, they can't say it was legal because if that was legal, then what Putin did was very legal, right? He had more reasons actually. If you look at what happened in Ukraine, how NATO was being pushed to the border, right? How the Ukrainians went against the Minsk II Accords and stuff like this, right? How they were pushed into what they were forced to do, and that's what I believe anyway, right? They had more of a legal reason from their point of view to do what they did in Ukraine, okay, than the Americans have, right? By blaming on some narco terrorists and stuff like this. So the Europeans are in a bit of a pickle because at the end of the day, for them now to try to still indoctrinate the masses by believing that their way of life is the best way of life and it brings about the best world and equality and stuff like this, it seems like the Americans are like ripping that out the playbook and throwing those in the bin. So where does it leave the Europeans? And especially one last point in terms to Greenland, where it's more closer to home now, where you have people coming on who are talking about this could be the end of NATO, right? Because they're saying if they take Greenland, then basically this is a NATO country taking a land of another NATO country, right? Kind of unprecedented. But it just seems like the Americans are going to go ahead with doing it anyway. But so where does this leave uh, the Europeans? Where does this leave the ideology of capitalism and secularism and liberty and modernism? Because all of these things now are in question.
And that's where I think you're right that they've been advocates of liberty and freedom and sovereignty and like I said, international law. But I would argue that actually this is actually a pure form of capitalism. Because actually capitalism, what is capitalism? Capitalism is survival of the fittest, serve your self-interest. Okay, that's about the individual, but that extends to nations, right? So the one who really, and Adam Smith said it, right? The one who serves his self-interest, to paraphrase, is how you really succeed, and you kind of get rid of the weak and might and strength, and this is how you prosper. This is how you progress. So I think obviously their system is not meant to be the purest form of they've brought in liberty and secularism, but capitalism itself, this is what pure form of capitalism would do, right? So the US is taking action. Why? Because of their own self-interest, their selfish interests. They're not acting on morality. They're not acting based on helping people in terms of humanity. They are doing it purely for their own self-interest to be able to, Venezuela is the number one nation when it comes to oil, even though they've not managed to really export it because of the sanctions and mismanagement. But actually, in terms of what they call, I think they call it like, is it proper oil or basically oil that they know is oil.
Yeah, yeah, oil reserves. It's got the biggest oil reserves
Yeah,
in the
like
world.
for example, there's probably oil everywhere, right? That hasn't been discovered, but for in terms of the percentage of discovered oil,
Yeah, known.
Venezuela has the highest.
Yeah, known
Yeah, known
reserves.
oil. Yeah, known reserves. Yeah, Venezuela has the highest, right? So no wonder this is obviously part and parcel of America intervening so that they can get their American companies in, and they stopped oil tankers. This again was another thing that was against international law. You can't go and blockade another country's oil tankers. That this goes
International waters,
against
yeah.
their rules-based order. Yeah. So they did that, and they also mentioned that the fact that they're going to be taking over and they're going to be exporting and gaining and seeking benefit from their reserves. So what I'm saying is, yes, it does go against liberalism, and it is, the Europeans are questioning it because they've been living in a world where they've been trying to implement this, and America is kind of following the laws of the jungle, where it's like, whoever is the strongest in that jungle, whether it be the lion or you can have an argument whoever it is, they're acting like that. And they're going to serve their self-interest and whatever it might
Just a
take.
point there, just to add to JK,
Yeah.
if you think about all these laws that came about, conventions, a lot of them were designed to stop another world war from happening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
was to maintain the status quo.
Exactly.
That's
Yeah.
the way
It was.
people need to look at it. People often get kind of tricked into thinking they did it purely for like fairness. And some people even think, oh, yeah, we don't want another world war. Clearly, we don't. Yeah. So that's why they put these things in place. But without looking at them and going, actually, they were put in place to maintain a status quo. And that
Exactly.
status
Yeah.
quo is of America being a superpower and
Yeah.
they never appreciate it. And can I just make a couple of points there? And based on, I never really thought of it from the point of view of what you said, JK, about capitalism and kind of being the purest form, because that, as there's been papers and stuff written about kind of the pure capitalism leads to fascism.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because like you say, dog eat dog kind of thing, you utilizing every medium, like mainstream media being used as a propaganda tool and all of this, that's what fascism promotes. And what we're seeing in America today is a fascist state. At the end of the day, that's what they're doing. And your question, to answer your question, Madge, about what the Europeans feel, I think in extension to what JK said, which I think is a really good point, but in Europe, I think that the idea is they're not the superpower. So their populations have had to buy into, as have the American population, that, oh, we're the carriers of democracy, freedom, liberty. We take this to the world. We take democracy to other countries. So, power is only power when the people believe in it. That's how power is born, isn't it? That people believe in you, people believe in your ideas, and then they put you in place. you know, when all of a sudden the things that people believe in are destroyed, which is what's happening, then the Europeans, certainly, they're not strong enough to go, okay, yeah, our ideas are being destroyed, but yeah, we remain the strongest. America still has that. So America can still go, we can do the bully boy tactics. We don't care about our values because in the short term, they remain the superpower because they've got the wealth, the power, the military. Trump's now talking about next year, or is it this year's budget for defense being 1.5 trillion. You know, they already spend more than every other country in the world combined on defense, and now they're talking about near, I think that's like doubling it or at least 50, 60% increase. So they're going about it the bully boy, you know, we'll continue to control the world based on our military strength. But the likes of the Europeans are sat there going, we've preached these values to our populations. Can we just suddenly now go, because America says so, we don't, yeah, this is legal now? You can't. And if you do, you lose your populations. If you lose your populations, you lose your strength. So America has this kind of it's utilizing or abusing that kind of power because from their point of view, they're still in that position of strength, whereas the
Yeah.
Europeans are not. And that's why the whole NATO argument, that's why, as we will talk about the Greenland thing, that will also be related. Just two very other quick points because of before we move away from like Venezuela, I think other things that people need to appreciate is some people will buy into the whole narco terrorism thing. Maybe people who don't read or people who don't look beyond the mainstream media, or maybe even people who don't listen to bloody Trump speech. Yeah, some people still seem to buy into it, which is crazy. Because I've spoken to people who just go, "Oh yeah, yeah, the Maduro's, you know, he's trafficking drugs and stuff, so that's why they needed to get rid of him." And then Trump, in his interview as well, was going, you know, because of them, 200 people are dying a day in America from drugs, blah blah blah. So some people are still ill-informed enough to believe that. So, but what they've got to appreciate is, it is for the main is the China threat, because where that comes from is America does have a lot of oil now. So the other argument that some people pose is that, oh, why do America need Venezuelan oil? Because America has loads of oil now. It's the largest oil producing nation in the world because of fracking.
Yeah.
America produce, if you look at the graphs, they produce more oil than any other country in the world. Yeah, in the last few years due to fracking. Yeah, so everybody's going, wait. So the easy, you know, the if you don't look into it, the easy is like, wait, there, if America, the largest oil producing country in the world, then why do they need oil? So clearly it's not about oil, but it is because the fracking results in a thin type of non gloopy type of oil that many of the refineries in America are not geared up to use that type of oil yet. Yeah, and so again, and refineries across the world, and then the proper oil and the oil that's coming straight out of like it's almost like preformed, gloopy, certain type of oil that a vast majority of refineries are kind of set up to take. The 300 billion barrels or whatever they say that Venezuela have is all that. And then if you look at the American map, all the areas where those refineries sit that need that type of oil are all on that southern border, on that southern coast, where Venezuela is only like, you know, few hundreds of miles away across the sea. So the idea is they're like going, well, we still need this oil. But why do they need the oil? Is obviously they've got these refineries. They want to control the supply of oil, but also because Venezuela were making deals with China to sell their oil in yuan.
Yeah.
So that what does that do? That goes against the petrodollar. So America have somewhat shown their hand. So I've been obviously positive. You know, I've been giving them credit in that they're gonna do the bully boy tactics. But why have they done these bully boy tactics? They would rather be a bit more in the shadows where the world thinks that they're a power for good. But the world now know they're not a power for good. And why are they shown their card rather than remaining in that, oh, yeah, we want people to continue to believe that? Is because they're at threat. They're at threat of a growing China. They're at threat of the petrodollar collapsing. they're 40 something trillion dollars in debt, which previously wouldn't have mattered because obviously, they print the money, IMF, oil is bought in dollars. All of a sudden, if they control the world's major supply of oil, that allows them furthermore to keep selling in dollars. That gives them more longevity in that superpower position. Whereas if Venezuela somehow, and I know it probably would never have happened, if Venezuela somehow managed to agree all of its oil trades and these other countries, this is a what's the word? It's also telling the likes of Colombia, it's a threat to the other
Yeah,
countries, isn't it? That if we can do this to Venezuela, we can do this to any one of you guys.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
It sets a
so
precedent.
it's like what's the when you show an act of you show an act to kind of make other people fear. Yeah.
Yeah,
So people need to look a little bit deeper because yes, it's not just to do with narcotics and drugs. It's certainly not just to do with oil, but oil is a factor. It's linked to the petrodollar, and but more so, it's their concern for a growing China, and that's why they're acting in a somewhat many people would say in a kind of a rogue way. They're acting rogue because they realize, that their existence, certainly in the medium to long term, is at threat.
mm,
Yeah,
Mm,
subhanallah, bro. And to be honest with you, I was thinking something similar when you talked about China,
mm,
and talked about desperation, because I was thinking what this does illustrate that they're now it's come a time where their soft power has been eroded,
completely. With
right?
Gaza.
With Gaza, right? Their soft power has been so basically from an ideological point of view, that soft power is no longer there, right? Um, so now they have to resort to hard power,
Brilliant
right?
point. Yeah.
They have to resort to hard power because of what was being shown in Gaza. And just another example is look at when some of these nations have to look at the Americans, or they just say they look at the Chinese as a competitor, right? The Americans will come in and they will regime change, they will destroy, they will rack up debt, and you will see civil strife. The Chinese, I'm not, saying they're the good guys here, but they will come, they will build you bridges, they will build you roads, right? It's a different, it's a
yeah,
different type of
It's
power
still
that's been,
control.
it's
It's
still
still
control.
control, but it's a different It's a style.
You understand? So I think gone are the days where the US were exporting McDonald's around the world. That soft power. That's gone now. So now they have to resort to this. And something that just comes to mind is we've seen this many times before that when a level of desperation kicks in, you see countries and nations and powers, they will go against the very things that they are supposed to stand for. And I'll give you an example, actually from the Sirah. You look at Quraysh, you look
mm,
at the things that they were held in high regards for. You look at then when the threat of Islam came about, when the dawah of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam was, clashing in the streets of Mecca. Look at some of the things they did. One of them, they boycotted Banu Hashim. This is like at that time, you look at the Arabs, what they were known for, they weren't known for boycotting their fellow brethren,
Yeah.
right? So, and remember, who were the ones who actually ripped up the treaty? They were Muslims. The treaty that was, hanging in the Kaaba, and whether they were then, whether they tried to stop the Messenger, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, from performing Umrah, for example. Again, this was free for anyone to come to the house of Allah, right? So, and then they resorted to actually executing the messenger, right? Everything they did when things got desperate actually went against those things that gave them the credibility in the eyes of the people anyway. And this is exactly what's happening now with the Americans, right?
mm,
And it's just hard power now. And fantastic point you made earlier, Rash, was that the European masses, they still are being fed these ideas, uh, and when they are seeing these ideas being contradicted, they feel at loss because they're actually not benefiting from it. But for the normal
yeah,
American, if this is saying this is going to make America great again, and they will have more oil, and they will have this, and they will have that, then they're like, well, screw these laws, right?
Yeah.
What does it matter if it makes our life better,
Mm.
right? So
Yeah,
I
I
think,
was.
yeah, right, Jackie, go for it.
No, all I was going to say is just linked to that point. I was listening to Tucker Carlson on this, right? And Tucker Carlson's an interesting character, right? Because he is Make America Great Again. He's still right wing, but one of the reasons he was against the Zionist state was because actually it doesn't make America great again. You know, you're bankrolling a foreign entity, and all the taxpayer money goes to this foreign entity. So that's one of the reasons why he was. I wouldn't say pro-Palestine, but he was anti-Israel, right? So you know, he did get a lot of prominence because of that. But on this topic, it's very interesting because actually, whilst he recognizes that there is some concern because actually, you know, by doing this action, you're going against the very principles that you stood for when it came to other nations such as Russia and China, and their activities in their own backyards. He recognizes that and he says that is dangerous because actually you are now, you know, you basically everything is fair now. You know, anyone can do anything. Like you've set a precedent now if you do this. What will that mean in the long run? But in a way, he's quite happy in the sense that he's praising Trump for not causing chaos because you know they didn't. This is not Iraq. Like they didn't go and invade Venezuela. They attacked, did a few attacks, and then the Delta Force wasn't it that went in and took Maduro and his wife, and also they haven't actually. There's no regime change in the sense that the second in power, I forgot her name now. She's the one in power.
Was it Dulce Rodriguez or something?
Yeah, Rodriguez. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Whereas the person they've actually sidelined is what's her name? Mercado, and the one who won the Nobel Peace Prize. So again, that's quite interesting. So actually, these people, the likes of Tucker Carlson, who do look at America and America first, they are quite. You know, they've got concerns, but they're quite praiseworthy because they view it as the way you just said it there, that well, this is going to aid America. We're going to get, you know, be able to control these resources. We're able to show a bit of power because, you know, America is kind of losing that a little bit. So again, it shows who is the superpower, who has the power in the world. It's a statement to the likes of Russia and China, but also a statement to all these other nations that are a bit anti-imperialist and are getting closer and deepening ties with Russia and China. It's a message to all of them. In fact, it's a message to everyone. Like you can taking it to the Muslim world, it's a message to the Gulf leaders, the Muslim leaders that look, if you go out of line of the American sphere, then this is what could happen. It's a message to Iran, obviously, with what we're seeing in Iran as well. So it's a clear message to the world that you know we don't. America is not bothered about following rules when they need to, you know, preserve their identity or preserve their interests, they will do what they need to do. So I'm sure, and I've seen as well that the Muslim nations, even Turkey, they've not condemned this. It's been more your obviously Venezuela's condemned it, but then you've got China, Russia, and other these nations that have condemned it. But it seems as though the Gulf rulers will probably be very worried. The likes of and even Erdogan and stuff, they'll be very worried. But they're having to play it a certain way because you know they're having to watch and see what America. And this is not Trump. Obviously, Trump has done this action, and they needed someone like Trump to do this actually because he can get away with it. But actually, it's, you know, it's the American deep state. They've changed their tack, where it was a bit more like you know they'd use pretexts and stuff like that because imperialism has always existed, right? American imperialism has always existed, but they've always done it behind a barrier and behind a bit of a facade. Now it's very clear cut. So
But
it's
that
really
was
really
actually going to
interesting.
be one of my questions in terms of because if you look at Trump, even through his first term, he praised people like Putin. He still
Mm,
praises President Erdogan as being like strong leaders and stuff
Strong.
like this, right?
yeah.
Um, so in terms of what's being done now, I think you kind of answered it, but you know, it might be worth just touching upon it because it could seem like, well, this is just Trump. He likes these type of rulers. This is his way he wants to do things, right? And this is how he's going down. But then, if that's the case, would the deep state allow this to happen in this way, right? And I don't think it would because he's already he can't run again, for example. And what they're going to change their tactics after a few years because what they're doing right now is quite bold. because it's a whole different type of approach, it's a whole different mindset. Like you're saying, it's like, look, we will do what we think is best for America. It doesn't matter about international law, it doesn't matter what anyone else thinks, right? So
Mm.
I guess what you're saying, and I think I'm in agreement, that this is not just the approach of one man. It seems like this is the approach that America is trying to go down. And maybe what it's thinking, I don't know what you guys think about this. Maybe it's thinking that by trying to play this undercover type of role where you're covertly trying to try to assert your authority, but at the same time you're trying to abide by a rules-based order and this and that. And whilst you're doing this, it's actually given the opportunity for nations like China and other nations like Russia to actually become in a position where they can actually be deemed maybe as competitors. Whilst now you're saying, listen, forget the crap, right? This is how it's going to be now. There's no more Mr. Nice Guy. And because we have to look out for number one, that's it. And that's why, especially when it comes to China, maybe they come to a stage now where they're saying, you know what, the way we've been trying to tackle the Chinese issue hasn't been right. And now we just need to be blatant about it.
Yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly. And I think as even take the Rodriguez, the second, the vice president who's now the president. It was a message to her as well that look, if we can do this to Maduro, we can do it to you.
Yeah.
So it's interesting, isn't it? It's quite clever in the sense that they've learned, I think, from Iraq and stuff, where they caused so much chaos, even Afghanistan, a lot of manpower, a lot of soldiers that had to go in, and they created a vacuum, and that vacuum was filled by militants and stuff like that. They created an insurgency, and while some of it has helped them in creating that fear factor of Islam, I'm sure a lot of it, and the American public didn't support it as well. That's a key thing. They didn't support, and who is Trump? Trump is the person who said that I'm going to end these what do you call it? These
Forever wars.
forever wars. Yeah. So whilst you could say, well, he's creating another war here, it's interesting. It's a bit different to what they've done in the past because
Yeah, with
Iraq,
Venezuela, they definitely
yeah.
don't see that as a forever war now. They
No, it's
like
not.
gone
Yeah.
in, strategic strike, got rid of the leader. Everybody else is now going to step into line.
Yeah.
We're going to take their oil. We're going to use it for our own benefit. We're going to put people in there that, they're going to control it, and they're going to have control of all the oil supplies. And you're talking, Venezuela that is so much oil. It's like what Libya and Iraq and all of these countries had combined. It's more oil than Saudi, which in the grand scheme of things, that's a lot of oil. So that in itself gives them a huge amount of leverage, and maybe Magic also leads into the Greenland thing as well, in that that is also multifaceted. It's about the natural resources, because remember, we're now in a world where it's not just about oil. It's all about also about semiconductors. It's all about tech. It's all about silicon. It's all about being able to, the AI industry is, whether I know there's some argument about there could be an AI, there could be a, what's it called, a pop. What was
Bubble.
the Sorry, a bubble. Yeah, it might be a
Yeah.
bubble that will burst, because there are some limiting factors. But I know this is not an AI podcast, so that may be for another time, because there's some interesting stuff going on in the AI world as well for another time. But because of that industry requiring so much compute and so much kind of data centers and infrastructure, you're talking about needing semiconductors and microchips in the billions and trillions. And where can you get that natural resource from? From the likes of Greenland.
Mm.
Greenland is untapped rare earth elements in there. And it's huge, and okay, it's very costly because the terrain will make it very difficult to mine a lot of that stuff. But the Earth's climate is changing.
Yeah, yeah.
So as the what's it called, the glaciers and stuff are melting, there's more now different sea routes opening up. There's
Mm.
potential for it being easier to mine because of the climate and because of the ground changing. So America sees this as kind of a multifaceted benefit. Firstly, if we could take it, then it's on our border. So strategic from a geopolitical point of view, it's strategic from a rare earth elements point of view and a natural resource point of view, but it's also strategic because this is where, and you guys might know more, in World War II, the Britain kind of set up some of their bases there as well in order to, because it's quite strategic from the point of view of like missiles and things. And again, that's not an area I'm that familiar with, but it's strategic from a security point of view as well.
America already has a base there.
America already has a
Yeah,
base
yeah,
there.
yeah.
So it's really interesting. And in the way they're going about it, like you say, bully boy tactics again, is like everything we've said so far. They're roughshodding through their values in order to make sure they're economically secure, security secure, oil secure for the next 100 years. And maybe that's what it is. Maybe they realized we're in danger. We've got someone like Trump, like JK saying, who can go about this brazen approach, and we're going to secure ourselves for the near future, using him.
So do you guys think they're gonna take Greenland? And if they do, I personally believe that if they do take it, whether it's via military or whether it's via them bribing the people that, as they're saying, who live there, the Greenlanders,
The
um,
Inuits, yeah.
yeah,
Mm.
for them to actually have a referendum or something like this, it's gonna leave a real bad taste
Sad
in
taste,
the
yeah.
in the for the Europeans, man.
There's only
Yeah,
57,000 population, isn't there? It's
yeah,
crazy.
yeah, yeah. Yeah. I don't. It's a good question. Like, it's difficult with Trump, isn't it? Because he says lots of things, Trump, and often you don't know how much of it is. He says stuff and then he goes back. And even with Gaza and stuff, he would say stuff and then he'd go back on it, or it would
The
just not
thing is
happen.
though, I think you're right, but they've put a lot of emphasis on Greenland, right?
Mm.
And secondly, with what they just done in Venezuela, and people are just quiet about it, other than just say a few who would speak out naturally, why would you not just take Greenland?
Yeah,
What the hell
I
is
think
Denmark
that
gonna do?
the reason, no, it's not Denmark. I don't think. I view it as the point you made earlier
NATO
that this would defy NATO. It'd go against it. This destroy NATO
undermine
because you're
undermines
going against
NATO.
a
But
NATO
that's why
nation.
I think the way they will do it is I don't think they will take the military route. I think
No.
what they will do is they will just get the people to vote, because like there's the opposition in Greenland, and the leader of the opposition basically he said, look, he goes, this is a discussion between the U.S. and Greenland. What's Denmark got to do with this, right? So I think, but what I'm saying is like even if that happened. People know this has been engineered, right? And actually, the
Yeah.
Europeans who have had their hands dirty in bringing regime change and stuff like that, and interfering in other countries, yeah, Muslim countries, they will know exactly what's going on. But this time, it's happening to them,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's going to leave a sour taste. And even if it doesn't activate Article 5 of the NATO agreement, right? Because it's like there's no military involved, there's no takeover. It's done via referendum or something, you know, that alliance, in all honesty, that trust element, if there is any trust, to be honest with you, is going to be out the window because it just means, like you're saying, you know, when it comes down to the Americans' benefit, it doesn't matter who it is, whether it's Muslim, whether it's European, whether it's your allies, whether it's NATO, America's going to do what they want to do. And I think that's a uneasy place for the Europeans to be, and especially those nations who themselves in the past have been great powers. I think it's
Mm.
just a uh, a difficult pill to swallow.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely, isn't it? Because they're meant to be allies of the US, right? They're on that side. If you want to call it like West, East, or however you want to mark it, then they're not allies of Russia. They're not really allies of China. But what could that cause? Like if America did such an action and they act like this, like going forward, then that does cause a bit of a shake-up, right? So will nations and it's we're difficult obviously because how strong is Britain? How strong is France now? But will nations start questioning their allyship with the US? And will they start to see some benefit in allying with Russia or China, especially as Rash was saying that there is a bit of a push for the fusion chip and stuff like that. And there's you know if it because people talk about World War III, right? I don't know if it will lead to that, but World wars can start off from very, it doesn't, previous world wars, it didn't take much to start a world war. So this could cause something like that, where people are then looking to take sides. And it'd be interesting, where did the Europeans stand after things like this? And even the Muslim nations, they will have to force to take sides as well. So it's very, that's very hypothetical, but it's very interesting. It's a definite shift in Western and kind of American foreign policy
Yeah.
from what we're used to.
To answer your question, Madge, though, I do think they will take Greenland, but like you said, I think there's more chance it would be
Yeah,
done in that what's perceived diplomacy kind of approach rather than it being, boots on the ground kind of, military approach. But that's the threat that's there, and that's there so that no one intervenes in that way. You
I'd
know, so
like it to be boots on the ground,
yeah, yeah,
But then it
personally.
shows, it just exposes them. The other thing I think is also this is growing to poke the Chinese bear. I think China is what there's the word for them, isn't it? They're not expansionist in that respect, and they're not
they're not.
interventionists and all of that kind of stuff. What's the word, JK? Sorry.
They're from economic perspective, they're economic expansionists, but they're not from a military perspective.
Yeah,
They're not.
but if you think of the military industrial complex and stuff, what do they want? They want war. They're warmongers. America, the people in the
Yeah.
deep state of America are warmongers. Yeah. So what's bigger a war than the war between like China and America? And that might sound like, it's not maybe a bit conspiratorial, so I'll put that out there first. But there is an element of every war that's happened has led to these people, these billionaires just getting richer and richer and richer. And I don't know how much you're looking into it. A lot of these billionaires now are setting up like underground bunkers and stuff, like doomsday type
Yeah,
scenarios.
yeah,
And again, people are just going, "Oh yeah, yeah, you've been watching too many, too many rabbit holes on X." But they genuinely doing that, and then that makes you think that what do these people in power, these elites, these Epstein file flipping people, these people who, they got no morals whatsoever. They're, you know, some of them are flipping Satan worshippers and abusing kids. It doesn't put it beyond the realm of some of them just wanting a world war and profiting from it.
Mm.
And stuff like America taking Greenland and doing what they're doing in Venezuela, it is poking that Chinese bear to a point where they go, wait there a minute, we don't want to necessarily come out and fight in this way, but if we have to, we will, because our
Yeah.
own um,
Interests are
existence is
being.
at stake. Yeah,
Mm.
so
yeah.
just a little bit to put out there,
The
a
thing with
bit next
China,
level.
there could be some politicians or think tanks or neocons in America who are probably thinking, you know what, now's the best time. Like if there is going to be a best time for confrontation, rather than letting them get to a level where they're close to us or closer, now because that clash is going to be inevitable. Now could be a better time, but
Yeah.
maybe that's the reason why they are looking for life on Mars and stuff like this. Because at the end, because the difference is, if you look at the World War I, World War II, there are people who talk about the bankers who are the ones who
Yeah, yeah,
came
yeah.
out are this the best, right? The difference now is those nukes.
Yeah.
Like you could have two
Yeah.
world wars, the bankers are still living it large, yeah, and people rebuild.
Mm.
Now you're talking about you start setting off these nukes. What are these guys going to enjoy? There's not even going to be Earth left,
Yeah, yeah,
right? From their
exactly.
point of view, right? But there's something that came to mind, and it's something that JQ was talking about as well. And you guys mentioned about with America and America First, and you mentioned about Tucker Carlson, yeah, how he was saying, look, why are we supporting the Zionists? It's going to
Mm.
be America First and stuff like that, which is a fair point. And only yesterday I saw this interview where Netanyahu, he was saying that my plan is in 10 years to be totally off the American money that they give
Yeah.
them,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? Maybe these guys are also, right? Obviously they have their own ambitions as well, but maybe they also thinking, listen, things are changing because I've seen other analysts talk about actually give it a few years when the next elections or the election after that comes about, you're gonna have people who are, even though they will be America first, but they're going to be maybe anti the
Yeah.
genocide in Gaza. They're going to be anti-imperialism and stuff like this. So what do you think the electorate is going to be like
Mhm.
in 10 years, right? And the Zionists are thinking, actually, you know what? Things are changing, and things like what we're seeing now, whether it's Venezuela, whether it's Greenland. I mean, now even with what's happening in Iran, right? These guys are trying to, Trump's talking about like if the Iranians start killing their people, we'll bring them hell and stuff like this. What's the normal person thinking?
Mm.
They're thinking, what are you talking about? You guys take out whoever you want, however you want. You don't care about international law. So, what right do you have to interfere in with what Iran's doing, on the ground in its own country? And then you have people in America who are then seeing these ICE officers shoot
Yeah.
civilians in the face, right? And they're thinking, wait, this is not America how I saw America. It's becoming a rogue state, like Rash mentioned earlier, right? Um,
Mm.
so maybe these questions are going to be asked in the future in terms of, okay, if this is the route we're going down, what's the alternative?
Mm.
I think so. I think, and that's where Netanyahu and they're thinking like longer term. In that, I think Rash made this point on a previous podcast that the candidates who are pro APAC, they used to get most of the support for being pro APAC, but now it's switched. You've got the likes of Mamdani taking over, becoming mayor of New York over Cuomo, and then even within other states, people are getting called out for being pro APAC because it's not America first, that's Israel first, because you're basically falling in line with the Israel lobby. So you're right. If at the end of the day the power is with the people, right? So if the people then turn against the Israel lobby, then the funding for Israel and their weapons will inevitably, in the longer term, go down. Obviously, America has this relationship with its kind of aircraft carrier in the Middle East, but this is after the Gaza genocide where people woke up and social media really showing to people, and especially the youngsters, who will be the next voters, right? Gen Z. After it's been exposed to them that this is what America has been funding and bankrolling, then there is a clear threat that
Mm.
will the funding always remain for Israel? So do they need to start looking at it from there? Like, how do they become self-sufficient? Because at the moment they're not. They're not self-sufficient. They're fully funded by America. Without American funding, they would not be able to do what they've been doing, right? So I think there are questions, which is a good thing in a way, in the sense that if it does lead to weakening of Israel, then that's a positive. But I think all nations are probably looking at post-Gaza world and why it was such a pivotal moment in modern history, I'd say as well. Like Gaza changed everything. The day they normalized killing children en masse, the day they normalized targeting and assassinating journalists who are meant to have like a universal status, right? That you don't target journalists. The day they bombed hospitals and schools, what does that, if they're able to do all of that and America is able to bankroll all of that, then everything is fair game. Like nothing is off the table now. So that's what's changed it all. Gaza has changed a lot, and perhaps America is is viewing it like that. That there's no point us trying to play with the rules. We've already been like not exposed, but people have already seen what we're about. Let's just take advantage of being playing that kind of, as you said, hard power, as opposed to trying to convince
Yeah.
people that we're a moral nation and looking out for the interest of the world, when clearly they're not.
You know what you just said there, and I think this is an interesting point where you said America might be thinking now post Gaza, even though Gaza's still happening, but you know what I
Mm.
mean, yeah, that they're thinking let's not play by the rules. I think what we're seeing now is that these rules were set up, like both of you guys have mentioned, to keep the status quo as it is. So they were utilized and they were referred to um, to to give them strength. And now maybe the world is changing. The world has changed since October the 7th, right? 2023, right? So now, basically, it's not like they're going against those rules. Those rules don't serve them the way they
Mm.
served them before. So they just disregard them, right? And I think that's what we're seeing. But guys, listen, what I want to do is get your kind of final thoughts. There's loads to discuss, but I know brother JK needs to leave us shortly, so I don't want to get him late. So yeah, Rashman, any final thoughts on this topic?
Yeah, my final thought is just obviously bringing it back from a political point of view and looking at it from an Islamic lens a little bit as well. And people might think this is not a thingy, this is a genuine link in that this is a phenomenal opportunity for Muslims to turn around and go, this is where capitalism leads, fascism. This is where these institutions and things you talk about, how they're toothless, and these all of these combined is what is leading to misery on earth. And this is what comes from man-made systems, man-made rules, and it's a great opportunity for Muslims to go, the only thing, the only in history, the only time we've seen justice where Muslims, Jews, Christians, people live together. The only time we've seen, like prospering of, education and systems and, all of those values, we saw it under Islam. We saw it under the system of Islam. We know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows us as human beings, our creator. He knows us intimately. He knows our good, our bad, what we, our biases are. And that means he created a system for us in Islam that solves all of man's problems. And if now isn't the right time for Muslims to turn around and go, guys, you guys have been living thinking this liberalism, capitalism, secularism is going to give you solutions. The world as we see it is what it's given you. It's given you Israel, it's given you America, it's given you a toothless Europe, and it's given you pornography at the level that we see it. It's given you, wealth distribution at the level we see it, where the rich continue to become richer. There's billions of people on this earth that are starving and struggling. That's what the value system and the systems of the world give you. And that's what happens when there is no Islam. And now is therefore the time for Muslims to go, I'm going to present Islam. You can genuinely, the number of, like you mentioned, Tucker Carlson and stuff. Have you not seen several of the clips now? None of them are promoting Islam, but every single one is saying, we've been made to hate Islam more by the Zionists. Tucker Carlson said it. Candice Owens has said it. They're all saying again. Let me clarify. They're not promoting Islam in the slightest. Yeah, and I don't think they. Well, Allah knows best whether they will or whether their hearts will soften. But that every single one is saying that. Wait there a minute. We've been pushed to hate Islam more by the Zionists. This was a playbook. So, if those people are now saying that, that means we've got a conducive environment for dawah where we go, that's correct, because they fear it and they fear the rules of Allah coming back on this earth and bringing actual justice. And that's why we all Muslims need to wake up from their slumber. We're all kind of, especially in these Western lands, we're comfortable. We can see it from a distance. We're not getting on the metaphorical battleground of ideas and going Islam. That's what solves all of these problems. So I would conclude it with all of the things we've seen. It is exposing all of these systems, and that's an opportunity for us to present Islam in its place.
Subhanallah, bro. Subhanallah. Well said, man. JK, what are you saying?
Yeah, I think Rash has probably said most of it there. No, I think I completely agree. And when it comes to these kind of topics, we do, Venezuela is a Christian country. Some of this stuff it's just quite difficult to link to Islam. But actually, as Muslims, as Rash is saying, that we have to look at the bigger picture. These incidents, they're not unlinked. They all really expose these nations and the capitalist system itself. Liberal capitalism is failing, and people are saying it, Muslims and non-Muslims alike. So to kind of add on to what Rash is saying, in that we need to present an alternative. One message I gave yesterday in the khutbah is that like tyranny and tyrants will always exist. You
Mm.
had Fir'aun, who was the greatest probably tyrant, one of the greatest tyrants, right? But you also had Musa alayhi salam, who brought an end to the tyranny and the Pharaonic system, right? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala supported Musa and his followers in bringing down the Pharaonic system, right? And bringing an end to Pharaoh. You had Abu Jahl, who, as you said, they defied their own laws and their own rules and their own way of life, if you want to call it, in order to defeat Islam. But in the end, who was victorious? It was Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and his followers who were able to do the work and effort, right? It didn't come without effort. It didn't just fall from the sky. They did what they needed to do. Musa alayhi salam had to stand in front of Firaun, right, and do what he needed to do without fear. Muhammad sallam had to do what he needed to do without fear and only fearing Allah, right? And you had many of in the Quran. Obviously when you reflect on the Quran, you see many cases of tyranny and these powers, the likes of Ad and Thamud, who were destroyed by Allah, right? So the question really is that destruction, they will fall. These tyrants will fall. America hasn't been around for a long, I was looking at it. 1945 is not that long ago, like in terms of when they became a superpower. It's not that long ago, right? I
Mm.
was born in 1989. That doesn't 1945 is not that long ago from when I was born, right? So they haven't lasted that long. Now they're talking about the American empire but if they're being exposed the way they are, and people are seeing them for who they are, we need to provide that alternative. But we also need to do the work, right? We also need to be the Musa alayhi salams of our time, be the Muhammad salams of our time, follow in the path of Muhammad sallam in terms of what he showed us. He gave us the blueprint. So now is the time, really. Now after Gaza, after what we're seeing post Gaza, like obviously Gaza's still happening, but what we're seeing happening in the world, now is the time to really offer that alternative to the world in a real way.
Yeah, subhanallah, bro. Subhanallah. Yeah, some good points, brothers. Some really good conclusion linking it back to Islam because there's one thing describing the problem, but it's also good to actually pinpoint people where to look for the solution. Um, just a couple of points from myself, really, linked to the actual issue we were discussing, to the international law, and the question I asked at the beginning, whether international law is ending. The reality is, international law as itself isn't ending, right? But what is ending is the West's ability to pretend that it actually ever applied equally, right? And once that illusion collapses, and kind of like people are forced to, especially in the West, confront something which is like uncomfortable for them, to actually ask the questions that actually look, justice, if we look at history, we can see that justice was never ever neutral. It was never ever applied in that way, right? That the law that they promoted was never neutral, and that in reality, power has always been that final arbiter. Once people conclude this themselves, then the question really they have is either they can continue believing this myth, or they can be ready to move beyond it. And I think that's where people will then have to start looking elsewhere. And Rash made a really, really good point that, like these Tucker Carlson, Candice Owens, and these people, what they're saying is that, you know, one of the things that the Zionists have done is portray an image of Islam which isn't true. There's a reason for that.
Mm.
People will get fed up. People will look at hypocrisies. People will look at contradictions. But if there's nothing there as a actually alternative, then they will just have to put up with it. And that's why what they're doing now is the streets of Europe, wherever you look, whether it's in like places like Australia, New Zealand, wherever you look in India, it's no coincidence that the Muslims and Islam are being demonized constantly. There's a reason for that. And that reason is that the people in power don't want the masses to look at, an alternative. In the same way, Pharaoh didn't want the people of Egypt to look towards Musa alayhi salam, to look towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the same way the Quraysh did everything, to the extent where they told people to put their fingers in their ears and put cotton buds in their ears just so that they didn't hear the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala being recited by the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right? This is exactly the same playbook. This is exactly the same thing that's happening again. So I would encourage people out there listening, like what Rush said, this is an opportunity. Speak to people, show them the hypocrisies, but don't leave it at that. Everyone's talking about the hypocrisies, but right now is the key time for us to actually promote the alternative, which is Islam. Brothers, Jazakallah khair for joining me on this podcast. MashaAllah, it's been a really good discussion. I hope everyone listening and watching has benefited. And if you haven't already, guys, like the video, leave us a comment, and definitely subscribe to the channel. And until the next one, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.